Lee Van Cleef was born Clarence Leroy Van Cleef Jr. on January 9, 1925, in Somerville, New Jersey, during the harsh years of the Great Depression. Like many men of his generation, his character was shaped early by economic uncertainty, responsibility, and self-reliance. From a young age, he displayed quiet discipline and independence, qualities that later defined his unmistakable screen presence. After graduating high school, Van Cleef served in the United States Navy during World War II, an experience that instilled structure, patience, and resilience. Military life sharpened his sense of order and endurance, traits that would quietly follow him throughout his career. When the war ended, Van Cleef returned home with no illusions of glamour, only determination. Acting was not a dream born of ego, but a craft he approached seriously, knowing success would require persistence rather than luck. Entering Hollywood. Through the side door. Van Cleef's entry into Hollywood was anything but conventional. He made his film debut in High Noon in 1952, appearing briefly but memorably among the film's silent threats. His sharp features, piercing eyes, and stillness made him stand out, even without dialogue. Hollywood noticed him quickly, though not always kindly. Rather than leading man roles, he was cast repeatedly as henchmen, outlaws, and villains. Throughout the 1950s, he worked steadily in Western films and television series such as Gunsmoke, The Lone Ranger, and Have Gun, Will Travel. These roles rarely offered emotional depth, but Van Cleef learned how to communicate power through posture, timing, and restraint. Though success remained elusive, he never complained publicly. He understood the system and focused on honing his craft, even when recognition lagged behind effort. Setbacks, survival, and an unexpected second act. In 1958, a serious car accident temporarily derailed Van Cleef's career, reinforcing the uncertainty that had always hovered over his professional life. For a time, it appeared Hollywood had moved on without him. Rather than surrender, he adapted. As American westerns declined, European filmmakers began reimagining the genre with darker themes and morally complex characters. Italy, in particular, offered Van Cleef something Hollywood never had: opportunity without prejudice. Directors saw his face not as a limitation, but as an asset. This shift marked the beginning of his second act. No longer confined to disposable villains, Van Cleef found roles that valued experience and intensity. His career revival was not accidental. It was earned through years of quiet professionalism. When opportunity finally arrived, he was ready to meet it with authority rather than desperation. Sergio Leone and the rise of a true star. The turning point came in 1965 when Sergio Leone cast Van Cleef as Colonel Douglas Mortimer in For a Few Dollars More. The role transformed his career overnight. Mortimer was not a simple antagonist, but a man shaped by grief, principle, and restraint. Van Cleef's performance was controlled, elegant, and deeply human. Audiences responded immediately, and international recognition followed. The film also paired him with Clint Eastwood, whose minimalist style contrasted sharply with Van Cleef's seasoned intensity. Rather than competing, the two performances complemented one another, creating a balance that elevated the entire film. For Van Cleef, this was validation after decades of persistence. He had not changed who he was. The industry had finally caught up. The success opened doors to leading roles and solidified his place as a defining figure of the spaghetti western era. A career defined by restraint and moral complexity. Following his breakthrough, Van Cleef starred in films such as The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, The Big Gun Down, and Day of Anger. These characters lived in moral gray zones, driven by experience rather than ideology. Van Cleef never relied on exaggerated violence or theatrics. Instead, his power came from stillness, intelligence, and quiet menace. Audiences believed his characters because they felt lived in, shaped by hardship rather than myth. Off-screen, Van Cleef remained professional and reserved, avoiding celebrity excess. He viewed acting as work, not identity. Even at the height of his European fame, he carried himself with humility. While others chased visibility, Van Cleef focused on longevity. His performances aged well because they were grounded in truth, not trends. He did not need to dominate the screen to command it. Personal life, marked by change and commitment. Van Cleef's personal life reflected the same complexity as his screen roles. He married his first wife, Patsy Ruth Kay, in 1943, and together they raised 3 children during his early, financially uncertain years. As his career demands increased, the strain proved difficult to balance, and the marriage ended in 1958. A second marriage followed in 1960 during a transitional period in his career, but long separations and professional pressures again led to divorce. Stability finally arrived in 1976 when he married Barbara Havalone. By then, Van Cleef had achieved international recognition and personal clarity. Their relationship endured through his later years and declining health. Barbara remained by his side until the end, offering companionship and support. Unlike his on-screen personas, Van Cleef valued privacy deeply and rarely discussed his personal life publicly. Speaking honestly about Clint Eastwood, late in life, Van Cleef addressed long-standing myths about his relationship with Clint Eastwood. He dismissed the idea of rivalry, describing their connection as professional respect rather than competition. Van Cleef acknowledged Eastwood's instinctive understanding of screen presence, particularly his mastery of silence and restraint. He recognized early that Eastwood was becoming a cultural symbol, not merely an actor. Rather than resentment, Van Cleef expressed clarity. He understood that their careers followed different paths shaped by image as much as talent. Eastwood fit the evolving American archetype. Van Cleef embodied danger and ambiguity. Both roles were necessary. Van Cleef believed their contrast strengthened their shared work, especially for a few dollars more. He praised Eastwood's preparation and discipline, emphasizing that professionalism mattered more than fame. Their legacy, he felt, was complementary, not competitive. Legacy beyond comparison and competition. Van Cleef rejected the notion that Eastwood overshadowed him. Instead, he believed history placed artists where they belonged. Eastwood expanded his influence behind the camera, while Van Cleef became iconic through presence and memory. Unforgettable mattered more to him than heroic status. He understood that cinema needed both figures, the silent lawman and the watchful hunter. Van Cleef took pride in his niche, knowing that audiences remembered his eyes, his posture, and his quiet authority. He never chased reinvention for its own sake. His career proved that there are multiple forms of success, and not all of them involve center stage. By accepting who he was, Van Cleef achieved something rare, a lasting identity untouched by trend or comparison. His work remains studied not for quantity, but for precision and impact. Working through illness with quiet resolve. Despite serious heart disease later in life, Van Cleef continued working with determination. A pacemaker allowed him to keep acting well into the 1980s, including his memorable role in Escape from New York. Even as his health declined, his screen presence never weakened. He refused to let illness define him, choosing purpose over retreat. Colleagues noted his professionalism never wavered. He arrived prepared, focused, and respectful, regardless of physical limitations. Acting remained his anchor. Van Cleef believed work gave structure to life, especially when the body faltered. His final years were marked by resilience rather than complaint. Though illness eventually claimed him, it never eclipsed his spirit. He remained a working actor until the end, proving that commitment, not comfort, defined his character both on and off the screen. Final years and an enduring epitaph. Lee Van Cleef passed away on December 16, 1989, at his home in Oxnard, California, following a heart attack, with illness having quietly shadowed his final years. He was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills. Inscribed on his grave are the words, "Best of the Bad," a phrase that perfectly captures his legacy. Van Cleef did not merely play villains, he gave them intelligence, dignity, and depth. His performances elevated roles that could have been forgettable into cinematic landmarks. In reflecting honestly on Clint Eastwood and his own place in history, Van Cleef revealed something deeper than rivalry or regret. He revealed acceptance. He understood that legends are not made by imitation, but by authenticity. And in that truth, Lee Van Cleef secured his place as one of cinema's most enduring figures.